All right, howdy everybody. We're going to talk about how to build this last step and build the 3 trusses. To do this, you're going to need your truss template, the blue truss template that you have, the rest of your balsa. This is just kind of a smattering of pieces I've got left. You will need your saw and your glue. And then there's a piece of color paper in your box like this. You can actually use any paper that you want. So if you've got some other color paper that you want that we're going to make into gussets. So let's get started. You'll also need something to use as like a cutting board. So either your board that the electrical boxes are on, or I just have a scrap piece of wood that I'm using for mine. Oh, and you will also need a pair of scissors to make your template pieces out of. All right, let's get started. All right, to start off with, we're going to get all our pieces together, I think, to get ready to go. So I need to know what I need here. So first of all, this piece is duplicated and this piece is duplicated. So I'm not going to need that, and I'm not going to need that. This is a good idea, by the way, when we're constructing. If you've got a missed measurement or something, you scratch through it so you don't make the mistake of going to that. So I'm going to need 3 of these pieces, and I'm writing on those pieces directly for a reason. I'm going to need 6 of these because it's duplicated on the other side. I'm going to need 6 of these because it's duplicated. And then I'm going to need 3 of these pieces. So the easiest way to deal with this is to make a template out of these pieces, because it's really hard to put a board on here and try and mimic that angle when you're cutting. It's a lot better to have something physical to go by. So this is where your scissors come in. You're going to very, very, very carefully, kindergarten, right? Staying on the lines and stuff, is cut these out and try and stay directly on the lines. It's going to take a little while because you're going to be perfect. I'm cutting so I can still see that black line as I'm cutting. And you're going to cut all of these pieces out, including when you get to this one, make sure that you've got on this top piece here, these 2 little angles cut off here of the top, because that's going to match right in there like that. So cut out your pieces. And then the other thing that you're going to cut is we're going to take our piece of just regular old paper. You could even use, again, other paper that you've got. And we're going to, I'm going to cut a little off that side, and we're going to cut some little pieces that are about this size, that are about the width of a board and approximately a ½ inch long. It doesn't have to be perfect. So the easiest way to do that is to line up my board on the edge of the paper, just a little smaller than that, and draw that line so that I've got a piece approximately the same edge, and I'm going to cut that piece out. This one doesn't have to be as perfect, but it should be close. And then I'm going to cut that piece, and you'll probably have to do this a few times. You'll probably have to cut about 3 strips because there's more pieces than you think you're going to use. We've got a lot of gussets to make, and we're just going to cut those into little strips about the width of your thumbnail ish. Okay. And get all of those together. All right, I'm getting all blurry again. And we end up with this. Okay, so now we're ready to start cutting. It just so happens, by the way, if you've got some studs left over, that the stud is just a little bit longer than that one piece, which will be handy to cut those out. Now, work smarter and not harder. Remember that the $100 bill speech, you're going to try and use the shortest pieces first, right? So that you have your longer pieces left over. And the way I would do this is I would cut all three out at the same time. So I think I'll start with my longer pieces because I need to make sure I've got those longer from the longer ones. Otherwise, you're going to run out if you keep cutting from longer pieces to get shorter pieces. So it's kind of like opening up a new container of milk when you still have a container of milk, right? All right, so I've got 3 boards here that I'm going to use to cut this out on a template. And I'm going to use this piece to actually cut it out and make sure I'm at the right angle. So let's talk about angles for a minute. It is, after all, a geometry and construction class, so let's talk geometry a little bit here. So if I've got a board and I'm cutting this board, and I've obviously magnified it from the balsa pieces, and I'm 1/16 of an inch off, right? So I'm supposed to cut the board right here. I've measured it. I've made my line. I'm going to cut it, but I accidentally cut it in 1/16 of an inch too short. So let me do my best to make about 1/16 of an inch. That's about right. It's maybe a little bit bigger than that. So how far off have I cut the board from what I wanted? Well, I'm 1/16 of an inch off, right? So it's 1/16 of an inch short because we're going in a linear direction. We're cutting at 90 degrees. But when you cut an angle, so let's say that I wanted to cut this board at an angle, and it's a pretty steep angle, maybe 35 degrees-ish. And I'm going to cut this board to that length, but I'm off 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so these 2 lines are the same distance apart as those two, maybe a little off. The big deal is, look at the difference between the distance here and the distance here. This is a much longer distance that I'm off now with an angle being cut. So that's why it's really, really important to be precise when you cut your angles and make sure you're right on the line. When we get back into the classroom, I shall show you techniques for doing this physically on actual lumber and not balsa wood. But the same thing applies here. So when we're going to make these cuts, and let me bring back my other stuff. It is really important that you take your time and be precise. All right, so let's talk about how I would do this, and then you can do what you want. So I'm going to use my little cutting board here, and like I said, I want to start with the with that longer board. Make sure I get those first. Hopefully you've got a bunch of extras so that if you make a mistake, you've got some to redo some things. And if you don't make a mistake, you're better than I am because I've already made a few of them. So, all right. So I'm going to lay that paper onto my board to get make sure I'm in the right spot. I got to make sure. Geez, this is kind of tedious to hold all this stuff. Plus, I need my glasses. All right. There we go. Now, I'm going to make sure that they're all nice and even. I want to use as much board as I can, so I'm going to put it over towards the corner of the end. Okay. And then I'm going to hold that all down with my fingers and put some good pressure on it. And we're going to go right up against there with the blade. Now I'll show you, I'm kind of pushing the blade up against the tip of my finger. I'm using my finger as a guide. And we're going to slowly start cutting those pieces. And I'm checking as I go along to make sure I'm right up against there. Okay. Now, I actually, kind of like a cooking show, I've already got these going, so I'm going to stop there. I would have cut all the way through it if I'd really been building this, but I already did that. And now, I'll flip this over to the other side. Once I've made those cuts, you will have cut yours all the way through, right? And I'm going to flip it over now. I make sure that my ends are even on this other side. I make sure that the piece is lined up. Again, you will have cut yours, right? And make sure that they're all nice and straight and neat and clean. And then we're going to go to the other side, okay, and do the same thing on the other side. If you prefer to use your template and draw a line, you can, but your line might be up more off than it's really easy to see this. And before I cut, I'm going to check everything to make sure that it's all lined up before I start cutting along this piece and cutting that way. Okay, so you're going to cut those pieces from the long boards. You'll have some left over that you can probably use for the 3 of these. And then for these guys that need 6, personally for me, you can try cutting 6 at a time. It gets pretty tall. It's hard to hold on to when you get 6 boards stacked up. If you feel like you can do it, do it. I would do 3 at a time. And we will end up with several boards now that we can assemble. So at this point, I've got my templates left over. There's also another extra sheet of this. I've got 6 of these guys. Now I already built my other one, so I've only got 1 truss worth here. I've got my middle, my 2 struts, my 1 middle piece here, and 3 sets of those. I've got my rafters, what these are called, and then my runner or joist. It is sometimes what that will be. So, and I've got my little yellow pieces of paper, got my glue ready to go, and we're ready to construct. I've experimented a little bit with this and kind of made some failures. So I'll give you the benefit of my failures and tell you that I think the easiest way to do this is to make this first and let it dry, and then come back and put in the strut pieces. So trying to put it all together at once, I just found it was really hard to do. So I just bailed on that and did part of it at a time, came back and did the rest. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to use your template. Okay. Now I'm going to lay this out right where it's supposed to be, and making sure if the board's bowed a little bit might help to put it the other direction. And again, kind of go methodically. What I found is it's easiest to put this one guy in the middle first and just do that. So here's the easiest way to do this is you take your glue and put a little bit of glue right here in this, where this seam is going to be, just a little bit, enough that it's, why is this? I always get a little bit of glue clogging up the end. All right. And this is going to be a little frustrating, folks. It was for me. It probably will be for you. It takes a little bit of time and being kind of patient. Okay, and you're going to have a little bit of glue right there. I put probably more than I needed. And then you're going to take one of those little pieces of paper and put it across that joint so that it covers that whole thing just like that. Now it's kind of up to you. If you're doing other things, you could let that dry for a while, but I found that I can go ahead and do the other pieces too. So I'm going to assemble the other pieces together, put them in the right spot, and then it's the same concept. See, again, this is where things get tedious. This balsa is so light that it's kind of hard to hold it all together, but I want to make sure that I'm being precise. I want to make sure that I've got everything the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to get it into the right spot. It's a little gap up there, but that's okay because I'm about to cover that over. And my piece up over here got a little bit crooked. So I'm going to move that a little, make sure, again, before I put it all together, that it's looking good and that it's precise. Okay, again, we're going to put a little bit of glue up here. And again, it's kind of tricky. It kind of wants to move around on me. So I'm going to pick up one of these little pieces of paper. And again, I'm kind of making sure that you can kind of smoosh it around with your finger to make sure that there's plenty of glue on there. This one doesn't want to seem to stick very well, except the wood to my finger. See, this is what I'm talking about. You'll have the same stuff going on where you're trying to make sure everything's glued together and it's all moving around on you. So it's good that you're seeing me struggle, because you're going to struggle too, and that's okay. Part of learning is doing things that are a little bit frustrating, but then when you get done with it, you're proud of doing. The other option, by the way, of doing this is and you might find this easier, is putting the glue on the piece of paper first. Putting that little bit of glue on here. And then putting that piece of paper onto there. Yeah, that might actually be easier. Okay. All right. So again, once I've got that kind of set and I've got it into the right spot, and again, I put it on the template to make sure I'm straight. Okay. Then I'm going to put the ends together, and then I'll let that dry. I think I like the putting glue onto the paper first, and then putting the paper onto the board. Works really, really well. Okay, so you're going to have a gusset. That's what these things are called. At each joint. You can try and go on from here, but I would recommend letting that dry. Just like this with the other gusset right here. In the full-scale world, you've seen gussets, like if you've ever looked up into garage rafters or into an attic, you've probably seen some of those things that look like this. And when full-scale trusses are being made, they lay out those gussets, and they hit them once with a hammer just to get them set. And then they'll put these trusses either through a huge roller, or there's a big roller that comes across that's really, really heavy that just presses those things down into the wood, and that's what gives them their structural stability. So here's a little video of what that looks like. I always thought that was pretty cool how trusses are made. All right, so now we're finally ready for our last step. I'm putting in those pieces. Now they look like they're symmetrical, but they're not. There's a steeper side that's going to go on the bottom, and a little less steep side that goes on. So it is a steeper angle on the bottom than it is on the top. So you do have to make sure that you're putting those in the right place. Now, a little trick with these is I found that when I put mine to go in there that I cut them accidentally a little bit too long. So just a little trick, if you have that happen, if it's too short, it's a little easier because they'll just kind of wedge up a little steeper than this. That's okay. But is that pointy end, if you just take your fingernails and just kind of pop that little corner off. Yeah, forgive my dirty fingernails. I've been working around my property a little bit. And then it fits a little bit better into there. So that's what I'll do just to make sure that it fits, is I'll pop just with my fingernails a little corner of that off. So again, that's why angles have to be so precise. All right, so now that fits in there really well. Now for this last one, I'm going to put just a cross piece along here and then do the same thing in the upper part. So there will actually be two overlapped pieces on the bottom of that end up looking like that are going to hold those pieces together, and then just the standard pieces that go on the top, and you will finally end up with your truss that looks like that. And the last final step is we will talk about installing those.